Okay, today's notes are going to be focusing on the Industrial Revolution. Our big unit question is looking at, does the United States need a second progressive era? With that in mind, we're going to look at the beginnings of the issues that arose that were attempted to be addressed by the first progressive era. So the question within these notes that I want you to answer at the end is, does progress benefit the lives of the American people? So with the framework of industrialization, do we see that the people are benefiting, or is there areas where you find some concerns that you think maybe either the people or the government need to step in and address that? Let's get started. Looking at the Industrial Revolution, it is a period in which growth and progress were emphasized through industrialization, which is the increase in new innovations. Remember, innovations are a new and improved way of doing something. It's the rise of factories. So instead of everyone making everything at home in what we used to call the cottage industry, people are now moving to the cities and working within the factories where they're able to mass produce items. There are big profits for entrepreneurs, which we will define in just a moment. So basically the idea that there was a lot of money to be made. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, everybody would be making their own goods. Those that were producing goods to be sold, it would have been at a much slower pace. They may not have been making as much money. But with the rise of the factories, they're now able to mass produce items and hopefully have a massive amount of profit. And then the idea of the rise of big business. What this means, the rise of big business, is that individuals were creating bigger corporations. So they would own multiple factories, or they would attempt to take over an entire industry. So the rise of big business, we start to see that corporations are rising up, lots and lots of wealth within individual companies. Entrepreneurs. What an entrepreneur is, as I mentioned before, that there's big profits for these entrepreneurs. An entrepreneur is somebody who invests their own money in an attempt to start a business with the hope of making it big. So the potential to earn a profit attacks people to big business. So they want to be able to create a big corporation, to create a successful business in order to make a lot of money. That is the goal of business owners. These people are the entrepreneurs. They risk their own money to organize and run the business in hopes of making a profit. They do have to sacrifice. So like we talked about in our anticipation guide, the idea that you're going to have to be willing to make sacrifices. And each of you I asked to think through, what sacrifices are you willing to make? Entrepreneurs have to ask themselves that question. If they're going to be successful, at what cost is that going to be? So initially, it would require a great deal of sacrifice on the side of the entrepreneurs. You're going to be spending a lot of time and energy and money in order to make your business successful. The effect? People who want to invest in new businesses and create new things are improving society. They're hopefully creating new jobs. They're hopefully bringing about more profit and more money to the country. And this would increase wealth, obviously, to the entrepreneur or the business owner, but the hope would also be that because they're employing more people, that it maybe would increase the wealth throughout. We will take a look specifically at how that pans out. It's supposed to increase competition. As an entrepreneur, you want to be the most competitive that you could in order to make the most money to keep your business in running. And then also the development of industry. These entrepreneurs are going to be developing more businesses, which would increase the number of companies and products that are available, increasing the amount of industry that we have in our country. So I'd like you to take a minute and think about the positives and the negatives in regards to entrepreneurs. How do they help society? What concerns might you have? What areas do you think maybe we need to regulate, if any at all, in regards to the entrepreneurial practice? So go ahead and pause for just a moment in order to address that. Okay, what is the goal of the entrepreneur? The first thing is they want to minimize the cost. So I want you to take a moment and think about, how could an entrepreneur minimize the cost? What exactly could they do to minimize the amount of money that their business is spending? And then, how could they maximize their profit? So in what way could an entrepreneur maximize the amount of money that they are making? So please pause and make a list of ways to minimize cost and maximize profit. In regards to minimizing cost, they could obviously look at how much they're paying for the products that they need to produce their goods. They could look at how much they're paying their workers. So all of those things could be done to minimize cost. In terms of maximizing profit, you obviously want to be mass producing goods. You want to increase the number of people who are purchasing your goods. And you want to make sure that you're charging an appropriate amount to make the most money that you can. In order to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to always be thinking in an innovative way. How can I improve production? Like I mentioned before, instead of working in the cottage industry, people making goods out of their homes, now we're going to move all the workers together into one location where they're going to mass produce the goods together. Those are factories. We're also going to be looking at the assembly line. Remember, the assembly line is when each person is responsible for one part of production. They are to become an expert at that piece. The assembly line makes things go faster because that person is only responsible for one piece and then they pass it on, instead of having to work from beginning to end to start and finish a product. During this time period, an innovative idea that was developed was the idea of a monopoly. And the next thing we're going to look at is what is a monopoly and how are monopolies formed. What might they have been producing in a monopoly? The assembly line products that would have come about during this time was the refrigeration, sewing machines, the telephone, the light bulb, the car. I want you to take a moment and think about how did all of these things change the people's lives? Did they benefit their lives, or did they harm the people, or were they just not worth it? If you're not producing a good that people want, you're not going to be a successful entrepreneur. Each of these things on the list are a benefit to society in some way. Refrigeration is huge to keep food safe. Sewing machines, we can mass produce clothing. The telephone, increase of communication. The light bulb, electricity, right? These ideas that are going to change the people's lives. The car, improving transportation. People are able to get places faster. So how do they make their money? They can create a monopoly. A monopoly is complete control over an industry's production, quality, wages, and prices. So it's one company owning an entire industry. So this could be steel, it could be oil, it could be the banking industry. So if you are in charge of all of the companies in that industry, or in charge of all the pieces that you need, you can have a monopoly in an industry. This means that you won't have any competition. The only company that's producing the good would be you. I want you to think about the positive and negative effects of that. What's good? Obviously, we see the fact that people can make a lot of money. The negative, though, if I'm a worker in that industry, I'm a steel worker, that is what I know. I have to work for the person who owns the monopoly, which means that they may or may not pay me a fair wage. It could also hurt the consumer because I only have one choice when I'm trying to purchase that good. It may or may not be of the highest quality. There are two ways to create monopolies. The first one is vertical integration. What this means is that you control all the pieces that are necessary to produce your good, which will keep your costs down, which means that anybody else that needs that service or those products, those materials, has to purchase from you. So for example, you see that somebody could buy out all of their suppliers. If they're looking at producing steel, they can buy out the coal and iron mines. They can buy out the ore freighters. They can buy out the railroad lines. So they have the raw materials that they need. They have control over the transportation of the good, and now they can control the cost. So if somebody else wants to produce steel, they're going to have to pay them to use the railroads. So you're controlling all the raw materials, the transportation systems, and every stage of the manufacturing process. So if you think about it in terms of like McDonald's, right? They would own the farm that grows all the food. They would own the factories that produces all of the materials, the hamburger patties, the buns, things like that. They would control the trucks that transport the goods. and then, of course, the final product that they put out. So therefore, if Burger King wants to purchase the goods that are needed to make a hamburger, they have to purchase it from McDonald's. McDonald's would then obviously increase the price in order to make it so that they are making money off of Burger King and also making it harder for Burger King to make a profit. So vertical integration is you're controlling all the steps to produce the good. Horizontal integration is when companies producing a similar product are merging. So somebody who owns oil, as a monopoly, they can control all the gas stations. So BP, Shell, Citgo, all of those would be purchased by one person. And even though they're separate companies, so to speak, they'd all be run by one person. That person can impact you because now if you want to buy gas, you have to buy it from them. So as a consumer, I don't have choice in terms of the quality. I don't have choice in terms of the cost of the good. So again, I want you to think through the development of factories, the development of the assembly line, the development of monopolies, and I want you to think what's good and what's bad about this time period. What areas do you think are progress, and what areas would you say are maybe areas of concern that maybe would need to be addressed through the progressive era?